So it's no secret that Pirates of the Caribbean at Walt Disney World is nowhere near as good as Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland in California. And the reason for that is because the ride was totally budget cut. Disney World did not open with Pirates of the Caribbean, and the number one complaint that Disney World got when it opened was that there was no Pirates of the Caribbean. So Disney quickly drew up plans to clone Pirates of the Caribbean for Florida, but because of that, they got stuck with the smaller version. But how much worse could it possibly be? Is it even worth riding if you've been on the original version of the attraction in California? Today we're gonna do a full in-depth review for Florida's version of Pirates of the Caribbean. Before we get started, please leave a comment down below, please like this video, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel. I am a pretty small theme park channel and I would greatly appreciate your support. Thank you so much. I've been on this attraction multiple times, nowhere near as many times as I've been on the version at California. I know that I ride like the back of my hand because I'm a local to Disneyland, and I ride Pirates of the Caribbean all the time. But I think the differences between both versions of this attraction are very, very interesting. So today we're going to highlight the version in Florida. The biggest difference that you're going to notice right off the bat is the presentation and the queue. The entrance sign is basically a massive sail, which I actually really like. I think it's really well done. And then the queue area is kind of themed to a fortress, which is very, very nice. Pirates at Disneyland basically doesn't have a queue. Like, it's just that one courtyard area, but it's 9 times out of 10 it's just spilling out into the walkway, and it's like wrapping around the bridge, so not ideal. I definitely prefer the queue for Florida, where they have a dedicated queue space. The indoor portion is definitely much nicer than that outdoor portion, which is than the covered outdoor portion, I should say, which is just a bunch of switchbacks, and switchbacks are boring, but it is 100% an upgrade to what we have in California. When you make your way into the load area, you're going to notice that their setup is a little different. Both versions of Pirates of the Caribbean dispatch 2 boats at once, but in California, both of the loading docks are on the same side. For whatever reason, in Florida, they're on alternating sides. I just thought that was really interesting. Also, shout out Cameron, who's a cool cast member at Pirates in Florida. In 2024, I got 3 rides on Pirates of the Caribbean at Magic Kingdom, and I noticed something interesting in row 6, which is the back row of the boat. If you sit in row 6, I thought the dispatch was like really rough. It was like bouncy. I'm not sure what was up with that, but when I rode in different rows, I didn't think that was the case, so I'm not sure why, but in row 6, it was just jostling me around a lot. I think the boats in Florida for both Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean are very, very similar. Like, they have a very similar design, and I had the same issue on Small World. Like, if you sit in the very back on Small World, you'll feel that bumping as well. So I'm not sure why that's the case, because I've never had that issue in California on either Pirates of the Caribbean or It's a Small World, but I just thought it was interesting. But it's a total nitpick, it doesn't matter at all. Just like the station in California, the station in Florida is very dark, it's very aesthetic. I do prefer the one in California, but it's still very, very nice. When you dispatch, you're gonna go right under their tower, so you can see the cast member in that like little window, which totally reminds me of Space Mountain at Disneyland, where their tower cast member is like staring right at you, which is kind of funny. But unlike our version of Pirates of the Caribbean, in Florida you dispatch straight into the cave scene, which is like total whiplash for me because I'm not used to that at all. So there is no bayou scene in Florida. There's no Blue Bayou restaurant, which is kind of a shame. I'm sure that would print money for Disney in Florida, just like it prints money here. So one of the first set pieces you're gonna see is the skeleton with the sword, and of course that crab. But in Florida, the skeleton and the crab are on your left hand side instead of on your right, like they are in California. Of course, the skeleton has like a little bird on its hat, which is really cute. This whole cave sequence for both versions of Pirates is very atmospheric. It is really, really nice. I appreciate the vibe in there. I would say the skeleton, the crab, and the bird have like very similar lighting to the version in California, but the storm sequence, which is right after that, is very, very different. It is much brighter, and I would say that's the case for basically the rest of this version of the attraction. The Florida version has much brighter lighting, which I feel like can be both a positive and a negative. For the storm scene, I would think of it as a negative, because I think the darkness just adds a little more mystery. It just looks a little scarier and a little cooler compared to this dark blue lighting that they got in Florida. Like, it kind of looks like he's just standing in front of a TV. But right after the storm sequence is where Florida's version has a drop. Right before the drop, you have that skeleton head. It's much, much larger than the skeleton head in California, and it like completely blinds you because it'll take your photo, which is really bizarre. Our version of Pirates of the Caribbean does not have an on-ride photo. Florida's Pirates of the Caribbean only has this one drop, and I think that this drop is about the same size as the second drop on the Pirates of the Caribbean in California, which is the smaller of the 2 drops on that version of the attraction. So that's kind of a bummer. That's a little lame. Also, during the run out of the drop in this version, there's like a really obvious exit sign, which is kind of lame. Like, I'm sure that's there for fire safety protocols, evacuations, whatever, but it is kind of a bummer that they couldn't hide it better. It's just kind of out there. Also, very similarly to the dispatch, I felt like a noticeable jolt in row 6, but I didn't feel it in row 3 and on my 3rd ride, which I forget which row I rode in on my 3rd ride. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know why row 6 on Pirates in Florida just tries to beat you up. I mean, it's a total nitpick, it really doesn't matter. But I do remember getting tossed to the side, only in row 6. But that's gonna lead you to the battle sequence, which is one of my favorite parts of Pirates of the Caribbean. The Florida version is unfortunately smaller. Like, it feels like everything is much closer together. One thing I will say is that like the water pops in the cannon from the cannon fire, they're much taller, so like you can actually get wet. Like the version in California, the water pops are smaller and it doesn't really feel like you're in danger of getting wet. Occasionally you might get a light splash, but in Florida it like soaks the whole boat, which is kind of funny. I mean, in the Florida humidity, I wasn't complaining, but like the boat that Barbossa is on felt much closer to the flume than the version in California. There's just much less space between the boat and the fortress, and even though the splashes are larger, they are less frequent. And when I rode, the red lights with the splashes seemed like inconsistent, which was kind of interesting. Also, the Barbossa animatronic looked a little smaller, but that just might have been my perspective. But this is absolutely a highlight of the attraction. In my opinion, it's the best part of Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just a visually impressive sequence for both versions of the attraction. Like, that ship is absolutely massive. It's very, very cool to look at. After that, you're gonna float into the town sequence, which is basically gonna be the rest of the attraction. It looks like in Florida that the town is much taller than the California version, which I thought was very interesting because most of the ride is smaller. Like, we just talked about the battle sequence that feels smaller than the California version, but the buildings in the town are taller. That might just be an illusion because you're closer to them because it is actually smaller. I'm not 100% sure, but that's the way that I felt riding the attraction. So this first sequence is really iconic. Some pirates have kidnapped the mayor of the town and they're drowning him trying to locate Jack Sparrow. For a while, the California version of Pirates of the Caribbean was kind of in shambles. Like, I almost made a video about it, but then they fixed everything, so I didn't have a reason to complain anymore. So when I rode this version of Pirates in 2024, the summer of 2024, I was very impressed that the water splashes were working in the well, and it felt like the mayor popped out on time with his dialogue. Like, sometimes in California, it feels like he pops out not in sync with the scene, and like, I don't see that splashing effect work that often in California, which makes me really sad. But when I rode this version, it was working. 100% satisfied with that. Also, I noticed that the wife opens the door all the way in Florida, which is pretty interesting. After that, you're gonna float by the first Captain Jack Sparrow animatronic. He's kind of on a ledge in Florida, which is very interesting that it's like the same animatronic but in a very different setting. And for the Florida version, it feels like there's a good amount of space in between this sequence and then the auction sequence. Like, at home, it feels like there's this sequence and then you turn your head and boom, you're at the auction scene. In Florida, it feels like there's a decent chunk of space before you actually reach the auction scene, but the auction scene itself is pretty much identical. I also thought that it had like a smell, which was interesting. Like, I couldn't tell you a smell of the version in California, but in Florida it like smelled like oranges. I don't know if I was tripping, but that's what I thought. The auction scene was a subject for a lot of controversy when they changed it a few years ago, and the auctioneer is like one of the most iconic animatronics in the entire attraction. He's might be my favorite one. It's either him or Barbossa, probably, or maybe the final Jack, but we'll talk about him in a moment. After the auction scene, you're gonna float into the chase scene, which is just a bunch of turntables. Like I said, when our version of Pirates was in shambles in early 2024, a lot of these turntables were broken for a sustained amount of time, which was really, really annoying because it feels like a very simple effect. But when I rode this version, all the turntables were working, which was really refreshing. And obviously, as I mentioned, they did fix our version of Pirates finally. So all the turntables are working on both coasts. as of my last rides. But the lighting in the chase sequence is very, very different. It's much brighter and you can see everything much more clearly. One little nitpick that I did have is that the chicken is noticeably connected to the water fountain towards the top of the sequence. Like, I feel like the darker lighting in California kind of disguises that. Also, California has 3 chickens, not 1, so I just thought that was pretty interesting. This sequence also has the second Jack animatronic who pops up, and then you got that little dog. Love the dog animatronic. But after this, you're gonna float into the fire scene, the burning city. The pirates in the fire scene do look different from the pirates in the fire scene in California, which I thought was interesting. And this is obviously another visually impressive sequence in Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, I love the story that the effect that they created for simulating fire was so realistic that they have to have like an emergency shut-off switch in case someone thinks that it's an actual fire. Like, that's just such a flex. And then for the finale of Florida's Pirates of the Caribbean, you have the jail scene, which, just like the battle sequence earlier in the attraction, it does feel smaller and closer to you. But this is probably one of the most iconic set pieces in like theme park history. The dog with the key, and then the pirates in the jail cell with the bone trying to lure the dog. That's just very, very iconic. So much so that it was in the thumbnail for this video that you clicked on. But I absolutely love this scene in both coasts. Unlike the jail scene, the final Jack animatronic has like his own space. It's way bigger than the one in California, which is pretty cool. And then another major difference for Pirates of the Caribbean in Orlando is the fact that this one has an unload area. Like, in California, you go up the waterfall, you turn around by the queue, and then you're back in the same loading dock that you got on. But for Pirates, you have an unload area and then the boats disappear. So when you get on the attraction for the first time, there's nobody on the boats, which does add a little mystery to it. I do kind of appreciate that. Like, I like walking into a load area and not seeing that someone else just sat in that same seat. Like, it kind of creates like a mystical feeling. Like, this one specifically for you, it makes you feel a little more special. But I do think that it's really interesting that even though it's basically the exact same attraction, that there's such a major operational difference. Like, it's crazy that the smaller version has an unload area, but the larger original version doesn't. I mean, not that it's that big of a deal. Also, I do kind of like going up the waterfall on the California version. Like, it kind of brings the ride experience full circle because you start by going down the waterfall, and then when you're back from your adventure, you're going back up the waterfall. But in Florida, they just kick you out, and then you go up a moving walkway, which is very similar to the moving walkway that exists in the Haunted Mansion in California. So it's crazy that they do like a switcheroo. Like, the Pirates in California does not have a moving walkway. The Haunted Mansion in Florida does not have a moving walkway. The Haunted Mansion in California does have a moving walkway. The Pirates of the Caribbean in Florida has a moving walkway. That's just really interesting. Also, something I noticed is that they used to have a lift cover to hide where the boats go, but in 2024 it was gone. And it was the same thing for Cosmic Rewind. Like, I'm not sure if there was an accident or a lawsuit or something, but the fact that the covers are gone is kind of lame, especially for Cosmic Rewind. Like, you're supposed to be back on Earth in the unload area, and the load area is supposed to take place on a spaceship, so you can like see from Earth to the spaceship, and it kind of breaks the immersion, which is totally lame on Cosmic Rewind. So I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure if they added them back. I haven't been to Florida since summer of 24, so I'm not sure if that is still the case. Like, obviously safety is the #1 priority, so if for whatever reason Disney decided that these covers are a safety hazard of some sort, then it is kind of a shame that they are gone. But because it was missing on both Pirates and Cosmic Rewind, it makes me think that something happened and it's not just like a maintenance thing or some sort of repair issue. And then Pirates in Florida is going to dump you off in the gift shop, and that is going to be your ride experience. So it does absolutely fall short of the Pirates of the Caribbean in California, which is the one that I'm used to, but it is still a very, very cool ride experience. This is absolutely a classic Disney attraction, and it is 100% worth doing. Just because it falls short, in my opinion, I don't think it sucks. It's just not ideal. Like, Disney World's whole thing is that they have more land, so it's just kind of funny that one of the highest profile Disney attractions is smaller in Florida. But I just think that it's hilarious that Disney tried to justify not having Pirates of the Caribbean in Florida in the first place because Florida is so close to the Caribbean. Like, bruh. If you're a local to California and you get to visit Magic Kingdom, Pirates might be one of the lower priorities for you, but it is still worth doing at least one time if you have the time. If you only have one day, maybe put this towards the bottom of your priorities, because I think you should definitely get your laps on like Florida specific attractions like the Carousel of Progress, Tron, the People Mover, or I would even take a ride on Florida's Space Mountain over Florida's Pirates of the Caribbean, because it's just so much more different from our version of Space Mountain. But yeah, Pirates is an absolutely wonderful attraction. It's a Disney classic for a reason. Thank you so much for watching this review video. Please leave a comment down below. What do you think of Pirates of the Caribbean in Orlando? I didn't even mention the Pirates in Paris, which is absolutely my favorite. That's even better than the Pirates in California. It's just so good. I only got to ride that ride once though, so I don't know if I'm comfortable making a video about it. Hopefully I can get back to Paris someday to get more laps on that version of Pirates, because it is by far my favorite that I've ever experienced. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.